beautiful from skies above? Is it underneath the willow tree that I've been dreaming of? Where is he who I close my eyes to see? Will I ever know the sweet hello that's meant for only me? Who's to say where he may hide? Must I travel far and wide till I am beside the someone who I can mean something to? Where is love?
Thank you, Coria. We are communally grateful for your dedication, for your commitment, and for your gifts that allow this fellowship's continuation. Thank you all. This excerpt is adapted from Saru Jayarman's book, Behind the Kitchen Door. I am a daughter of immigrants from India. When I was young, my mother and father didn't take my sisters and me out to eat very often. I moved out of my parents' house. I ate out every time I had the opportunity. Eating out became a part of my lifestyle. As I traveled to different parts of the world, I realized that Americans have a unique relationship to eating out. It isn't that there aren't restaurants in other parts of the world. There are world-famous chefs and restaurants, new and old, busy and slow, all kinds, all over the world. It's the frequency with which Americans eat out, and the way we choose to mark so many of our life events, birthdays, anniversaries, marriage proposals, in restaurants. Restaurants are a space in which families gather, friends meet, and new connections are made. Restaurants are where American culture happens. Every one of us can probably tell a story about a life-changing moment in a restaurant. We remember the way it looked, who was there, where we sat, what we ate, and how it smelled. However, we tend not to notice who is handling our food. It's strange that most of us spend so much of our time and income in restaurants, yet think so little about restaurant workers. They perform the most intimate acts for us, cooking and serving food, acts that have typically been reserved for a parent or a partner. Please rise as you're willing and able for our next hymn, We Are a Gentle, Angry People, number 170.
We
I now have the honor of introducing our speakers this morning. Reverend Linda Lawrence was a school psychologist for 20 years before pursuing her childhood call to ministry. She attended the Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago, Illinois, and worked as a parish minister, counseling minister, and hospice chaplain before moving to Arizona, presumably to retire. This is her 4th year working with the UU Congregation of Phoenix, and her 3rd year as their assistant minister. Gary Lawrence has worked for 30 years in the aerospace industry and went back to school for a Master of Fine Arts in Writing from Vermont College, and currently teaches English composition at Glendale Community College. I think I may have been in one of your classes. He had his first book published this fall, Baffled and Other Short Stories. Gary and Linda have 5 adult children and 4 grandchildren spread around the country, none in Arizona, and a 10-year-old Yorkie poo. What's the dog's name? Rocky, all right. Please welcome Reverend Linda Lawrence and her husband Gary.
Thank you. It's really wonderful to meet other Unitarian Universalists and to be in your space and to share some of the excitement about someday a new space here on your campus. That's wonderful. I want to thank Joe and Ann and Tom and Judy, who isn't here, for helping put this service together and coordinate with me over this past week. So this year, the Unitarian Universalist Association has chosen this book, Behind the Kitchen Door, as our common read. Excuse me. When I first heard that title, I was momentarily taken back to my high school days and college days too. At 15 years of age, I was a waitress at Donut Land. That was my first job after babysitting. And I remember food fights in the back room using, do you know how they fill donuts? They have a pump with a spout, and they stick the donut on it, and they go whoosh, and then the cream or the fruit filling goes into the donut. However, if you just happen to forget to put a donut on the end, and if you just happen to point it at one of your coworkers, you can have a lot of fun. Of course, you don't do that when the boss is around. In high school, I worked at Hollywood, which is a restaurant similar to Denny's. And behind the kitchen door meant something else entirely to me at that time because my boyfriend worked there too. So I'll let you imagine what that might mean. When I started college, I had to work to pay what scholarships didn't cover. And my first work grant assignment was in the cafeteria, where I experienced a lot of what it takes to prepare, serve, and clean up after 3 meals a day for hundreds of people, day in and day out. How many of you have ever worked in restaurants or held food service jobs? All right, quite a few of us. Well, I certainly had some fun in those kinds of jobs in my youth, but I also saw the competition for the most coveted positions in the kitchen, or on the line, or out on the floor. And I witnessed blatant favoritism. I had trouble getting time off or finding a replacement when I was sick. and I noticed that the health and safety regulations were given lip service but sometimes ignored. How many of you enjoy eating out? I do. So my goal today is not to discourage you from restaurant dining. My goal is to help you become a more discriminating diner, not in the foodie or sophisticated taste kind of way. I hope to help you become a better educated diner, more aware of the moral, ethical, and social justice implications of your choices. Behind the kitchen door uncovers what is often invisible to us as restaurant patrons. The book asks us to consider not only the origin and the goodness of the food we eat, but also the well-being of those who prepare and serve it, many who have to support themselves, their children, and their dependent elders, while dealing with low wages, wage theft, poor working conditions, racial discrimination, and sexual harassment. So, here we are, coming up to Thanksgiving, and we're supposed to be talking about gratitude, right? Why am I talking about such a rough, tough, kind of emotionally tugging kind of topic? Well, it deals with food in the broader sense, and I wanted to highlight the plight of people who try to earn a living in restaurants. Most of the lowest paid workers in the restaurant industry are indigenous and immigrant people. Now, I promise I'm not going to leave you down in the dumps with a lot of sad stories, because there are some ways that we can make a positive impact on the lives of restaurant workers. But first, I want you to hear some of their stories. So Gary's going to help me bring their voices to you today, and we're going to share some of the stories from behind the kitchen door.
My name is Woon Chang. I was born and raised in Korea. My father built a successful dental practice there, but my family gave up almost everything they had to come to America. My parents wanted me and my sister to get a better education than we could get in Korea. We moved to Los Angeles with a few suitcases and the clothes on our backs. The first few years, my father went back to Korea for 2 or 3 months at a time to keep his practice going, and I got a degree at UC Berkeley. After that, I worked for a while as a carpenter. Then I decided to travel. I went all through Central and South America by bus, working in restaurants to get by. After 9 years, I returned to the U.S. With my skills and years of experience in the restaurant industry, I was very excited to take my career to the next level. But it's been quite a struggle. I've seen many bad things. Workers who were seriously injured on the job. People who got burned or cut but felt they couldn't leave their shifts for medical treatment. No injury reports or workmen's compensation claims were ever filed. I once became very sick while working for a fine French restaurant in the Washington, D.C. area, but I had no paid time off, and I was afraid I'd lose my job if I didn't show up for work. I kept working but continued to get sicker and sicker. I was finally diagnosed with swine flu. I ended up in bed for a month without pay, piling up credit card debt just to survive. Once I was able to return to work, I found out I no longer had a job. Many of us restaurant workers are threatened with dismissal if we don't work when we're sick. We don't want to pass our germs on to you, but we have to protect our jobs and our dependents too. The minimum wage for tipped workers varies by state. When I was working in D.C., the minimum wage there was $2.77. Taxes would cancel out my wages so that my take-home pay without tips was often zero. There was never a guarantee of making enough to survive. Still, I was fortunate. I wasn't like some of the other immigrants I saw every day. I spoke English and was able to earn higher tips than many of them. I was in many ways a person of privilege and a person with some support from family. Even so, I was nearly wiped out by one serious illness. I shudder to think how others make it, especially new immigrants working in the kitchen. They are often the best and hardest workers, but they get the worst jobs and the least pay.
My name is Claudia. I live in Texas, but I was born in the foothills of Monterrey, Mexico. I moved to the United States with family members when I was a child. I am an undocumented immigrant and now a college student. In the fight for humane immigration reform, I am called a dreamer. My family was very poor when we came to this country. My mother has had several major illnesses. I want to get a good education and help my family. Working my way through high school and college, I've had many restaurant jobs, and I want to tell you some of my experiences. In one restaurant where I worked as a waitress, the manager kept putting me in the least popular seating area, so I wasn't making many tips. I was earning the minimum federal wage for tipped workers, $2.13 an hour. My tips were supposed to make up the difference between the $2.13 per hour the restaurant paid me and the $7.65 that was the Texas state's established minimum wage. If my tips didn't make up that difference, the restaurant was supposed to make up the difference according to federal law. But my boss told me, if you don't make enough tips to make up the difference, you have to report that you made the money anyway. He told me to report tips I wasn't making so the restaurant wouldn't have to pay the difference. Some people don't tip, or just leave a small tip. They don't realize that I have to share my tips with the runners who bring out the food, the bussers who cleaned my tables and pour water and coffee for my customers, the bartender when customers order drinks, and sometimes even with the manager, although technically that's against the law. When we work banquets or special events, we workers rarely get tips at all, even though a gratuity is tacked onto the customer's bill. Some managers have told me I can only serve Latino customers, even though my English is fine now. I've had to put up with inappropriate touching, too. Some bosses and customers make lewd or suggestive comments. If I complain, I might be fired. I've seen it happen. Sometimes I have to flirt with the cooks just to eat. The food allowance the restaurant gives employees is barely enough to buy the cheapest item on the menu. Many days I can't eat at all if I'm not given a shift that's long enough to qualify for a free employee meal. I have too many other things I have to buy with my paycheck and with my tips. Things like books, gas, or bus tokens, other living expenses. Occasionally I'm forced to pay the bill for customers who walk out without paying. My paycheck can't always cover that, so I end up owing the restaurant after working hard for 30 or 40 hours. That really throws me into crisis. I help my family out when I can, but I don't know what I'd do if I had my own children to feed, like some of the other wait staff do.
My name is Franz, and I came to the U.S. from Haiti in 2008. My mother lost her job in Haiti, so we couldn't keep paying my college tuition. I wanted to be a mechanical engineer, but I had to drop out of school when I was 20. I'm 23 now, and I live with my parents, grandparents, and brother in a small house in Miami Beach. All of us work to contribute to the household expenses, but sometimes we can barely make rent. We'd like to be able to send money to my aunt and uncle who lost everything in the hurricane of 2010, but we really struggle to make ends meet. I've been working as a dishwasher at the Capitol Grill in Miami. I don't get paid much to begin with, but my manager often clocks me out before the end of my shift. He's done that to other Haitian workers too, and when they complain, they get their hours cut even more. I can't afford to have that happen to me. One really busy night, I was helping another Haitian dishwasher, an older man who was slow getting the dishes rinsed and stacked for washing. Some of the other kitchen workers, the Latino bussers and the lighter-skinned black cooks, were mimicking our accents and calling us dumb. One of them said, "You guys are working like slaves," and laughed. I told him I didn't appreciate being called a slave. The manager heard all of these taunts, but didn't say or do a thing about them. I've had a lot of restaurant experience, and I've asked lots of times to be promoted to a busser position. I found out there's a color line in the lot of restaurants. The color line is not always quite as bad in fast food, family, or casual dining places. It depends some on where the restaurant is located, but you can see the pattern, especially in the finer big city restaurants. White workers are in front, serving or bartending. Sometimes there are a few workers of color bussing tables, running the hot food out, maybe hosting. But most people with dark skin like me are behind the kitchen door, preparing and cooking food and washing dishes. And that's only if they manage to get through the application process, where the initial color discrimination happens. My family has lost a lot. We're probably better off than we would have been if we'd stayed in Haiti. But so far, America isn't quite the land of opportunity we'd hoped for.
When Unitarian Universalists consider the topics of ethical eating and sustainable food practices, we generally think about environmental concerns, health issues, and humane treatment of animals. Many of us choose locally grown and locally produced food whenever possible in order to decrease the negative environmental impact of transporting food over long distances. If we can afford it, we like to eat organic foods, enjoying produce that is grown without the use of pesticides. We don't especially want genetically modified foods or foods that contain harmful preservatives. If we eat meat, eggs, or dairy products, we prefer livestock that's been raised in a humane manner without added growth hormones and unnecessary antibiotics. Now, don't get me wrong, these are all valid concerns. It is important that we do what we can to ensure our health. And it's good to be concerned about the well-being of our planet and its inhabitants. However, as Behind the Kitchen Door author Saru Jayaraman reminds us, food can't really be healthy, ethically consumed, or sustainable if it's prepared and served in an environment that permits abuse, exploitation, and discrimination. It's definitely not sustainable to eat food served by workers who cannot afford to feed their families and face the added burden of having their wages and tips stolen. Sustainable food, by definition, must include fair labor practices. And to that I say, amen, sister. Jayaraman's book got me thinking that there might be bigger social and moral issues involved in the plight of food industry workers. I discovered evidence of these larger issues in a recent New York Times article written by Daniel Goleman, author of the book Emotional Intelligence. Goleman says, there's a growing body of recent research that shows that people with the most social power pay scant attention to those with little such power. The more powerful pay less attention to us than we do to them. In other situations, when we are relatively higher on the totem pole of status, we too tend to pay less attention to those a rung or two down. A prerequisite to empathy is simply paying attention to people in distress. A prerequisite to empathy is simply paying attention to people in distress. Several recent studies found that the more powerful were less compassionate toward the hardships described by the less powerful than they were toward someone of a similar social status to their own. And Goldman writes, since the 1970s, the gap between the rich and everyone else has skyrocketed. Income equality is at its highest level in a century. This widening gulf between the haves and have-less troubles me, he says. Apart from the financial inequities, I fear the expansion of an entirely different gap caused by the inability to see oneself in a less advantaged person's shoes. Coleman concludes, reducing the economic gap may be impossible without also addressing the gap in empathy. Now, we may not consider ourselves rich or of high social status, but by and large, we are a privileged people compared to most workers in the restaurant industry. Will we turn a blind eye to their troubles, give them a cold shoulder, look down on them, or maybe even see right through them? Or will we care more and find ways we can help alleviate the distress of the people who prepare and serve our food, recognizing their inherent worth and dignity? Remember, a prerequisite to empathy is simply paying attention to people in distress. So today I invite you to consider some questions I've been asking myself. If I agree with Jayaraman that workers behind the kitchen door are suffering for a variety of reasons, what am I going to do about it? What changes do I need to make? As a customer, where do I start if I want to help the restaurant industry become more just and compassionate and equitable? What can I do? Author Saru Jayaraman has been thinking a lot about these questions and a lot about other people. She's the director of the Food Labor Research Center at the University of California, Berkeley. And she also helped found Restaurant Opportunity Center United, or ROC, R-O-C. Their website is www.rockunited.org, and I believe that is printed on your order of service, somewhere with a description or a reading about today's sermon. So that's a good website to remember and to take a look at. The ROC website offers a diner's guide you can download or print to get as a or get it as a mobile phone app. I'm not that technologically advanced yet, but maybe some of you are. The Diner's Guide rates restaurants based on wage, sick day, and employee promotion practices. So it's a handy tool if you want a quick report card on many of the large restaurants across the country. Unfortunately, the guide doesn't rate Phoenix area fine dining establishments. It has its flaws. It doesn't translate entirely to our area, but it gives you some clues, some things to think about, and it does list some of the Valley's chain restaurants. So let's get to back to that question of what can we do to make life better for restaurant workers and their families? How can we demonstrate that we care and begin to affect change? Well, here are some ideas from that ROC website and from the book Behind the Kitchen Door. First, let's check out that Diner's Guide on the ROC website. Did you know that 75% of Americans eat out at least once a week? Many of us probably eat out far more often. The Diner's Guide provides a way for us to claim our power as consumers. In their publicity material, they say, we don't just hold forks when we eat out, we hold incredible power. So, we can take our business to restaurants with high ROC ratings. We can thank them for their good labor practices and hopefully for their good food. We can take our business to a restaurant with low or no rock ratings, and we can talk with employees and managers there. Let them know that we as consumers care about their labor practices. There's even a video on the Rock website that teaches people how to start a conversation like that. So how hard could it be? We can do it. Gary and I do it all the time. We talk to the waitresses, sometimes to the manager, and we ask them if they get sick days that are paid. You know, do they get to keep their tips? If we write it on our credit card, do they end up getting that money, or does somebody else get it? We can also print out and use the I Eat Ethically cards. Gary's showing, I made some for you. They're on the table in the back if you're interested in using them. They say I eat ethically, and they give some things that you're looking for in your restaurant for how they treat their people. So feel free to take some of those and leave them whenever you eat out, and you can go to the website and print out more of your own. So what else can we do to walk our talk about social responsibility? There are some petitions on that website. We can sign the petition in support of legislation that will guarantee paid sick time for restaurant workers. We can sign a petition to show our support for the passage of the Fair Minimum Wage Act. So until I read this book, I'll show it to you again, I was ignorant about the minimum wage for tipped workers. I knew tips were supposed to account for just a portion of a restaurant worker's pay, but I had no idea that the federal minimum wage standard for tipped workers is so low. Congress hasn't passed an increase to the tipped minimum wage in 22 years. So, in 1991, a loaf of bread cost 70 cents. The average salary was $29,000, and the federal minimum wage for tipped workers was $2.13. Okay, 1970, long time ago, right? Well, 22 years later, bread is closer to what, $3 a loaf? The average take-home pay is about $40,000, and the federal minimum wage for tipped workers is still $2.13. Fortunately, states can set higher minimum wages for tipped workers, but not all do. In Arizona, the minimum wage for tipped workers is $4.80, so workers have to make $3 an hour in tips to bring that up to the state minimum wage of $7.80. This is poverty level pay if you are the sole support of your family. Please learn about the Fair Minimum Wage Act. Go to the Rock website to sign the petition in support of it, and support amendments to the Fair Labor Standards Act that would also increase the federal minimum wage. Here's another thing we can do. We can make it a practice to be good tippers. Some of our European brothers and sisters, I've heard from my friends, come over here with big groups and eat out and leave no tips because they don't realize that our workers count on tips. So Gary and I decided a long time ago that we wouldn't eat out if we couldn't afford to also tip at least 20%. Now that may be low by some people's standards today, but that's our goal. And remember that the tips that we leave are often divided up among a number of workers. And finally, this seems like it should go without saying, but I'm going to say it. When you eat out, please be kind to the wait staff. Be respectful. Remember that restaurant workers are people first. They have their own lives, their own families, their own troubles. The Dalai Lama once said, "My religion is kindness." And I believe that kindness is also one of our core values. As Unitarian Universalists, our kindness springs from a deep respect for the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Our kindness includes actions that promote justice, equity, and compassion. We are a privileged, powerful people. May we be humble enough to learn from the stories that we've heard today. May we be caring enough to pay attention to those in pain. May we be bold enough to claim our power to act in their behalf. May it be so. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend and Mr. Lawrence. We're now going to try something new. Our closing hymn is going to be sung by Glenn on the guitar, and it is called Please Tip Your Waitress.
Do when we get here.
Worth waiting for.
I'm Glenn, your singing waiter. And luckily we have a very professional pianist with us today. You know she is a professional musician, don't you? Well, and I love leading sing-alongs. I'm going to teach you the chorus this way. I'm going to sing the first verse, then we're going to sing the chorus twice, the first time around. So we'll sing the chorus one time, I'll count to 3, we'll sing it again. And we're in the key of C. 16 tables, 4 chairs at each one. Shows every night, she's on the run. 3 coffees here, 5 desserts there, let's go. Some jerk over there says she's too slow. Please tip your waitress, she's working hard for you. She'll walk a few miles before she's through. She's got bills to pay and food to buy like you. Please tip your waitress, cause she's working hard for you. 2, 3. Please tip your waitress, she's working hard for you. She'll walk a few miles before she's through. She's got bills to pay and food to buy like you. Please tip your waitress, cause she's working hard for you. It's honey this and dear that all the time. But that's not half as bad as all those lines. She's a strong woman and her temper's gonna perk. If one more guy asks when she gets off work, please tip your waitress, she's working hard for you. She'll walk a few miles before she's through. She's got bills to pay and food to buy like you. Please tip your waitress, cause she's working hard for you. When she gets home from work, she still can't rest. Cause tomorrow at the college there's a test. She's up early in the morning as a rule, making sure that the kids get off to school. Please tip your waitress, she's working hard for you. She'll walk a few miles before she's through. She's got bills to pay and food to buy by like you. Please tip your waitress, cause she's working hard for you. Her paycheck's low, she does the work for two. When something's wrong, the folks blame you know who. And when they say, come on now, where's your smile? While the owner's getting richer all the while. Please tip your waitress, she's working hard for you. She'll walk a few miles before she's through. She's got bills to pay and food to buy like you. Please tip your waitress, cause she's working hard for you. One more time. Please tip your waitress, she's working hard for you. She'll walk a few miles before she's through. She's got bills to pay and food to buy like you. Please tip your waitress, cause she's working hard for you.
I don't have bills to pay.
As we extinguish our chalice, please join me in reciting our mission statement as a demonstration of our fellowship, support for one another, and commitment to the wider community. This church provides a safe place to celebrate diversity, draw inspiration for our lives, foster social and environmental justice, and compassionately support each other in our spiritual searches. Thank you to our musicians, Joe Cleveland and Glenn Snyder, and to Ann Harper for our chalice lighting, and to our greeters, and to all others who are helping today, and of course, to Reverend Lawrence and her husband Gary. Our closing words will now be a unison reading of number 502 in our hymnals. Now is the accepted time, not tomorrow, not some more convenient season. It is today that our best work can be done, and not some future day or future year. It is today that we fit ourselves for the greater usefulness of tomorrow. Today is the seed time. Now are the hours of work, and tomorrow comes the harvest and playtime. Ann Harper and Joe will now provide us with the postlude.
Is it worth the waiting for? If we live to 84, all we ever get is gruel. Every day we say a prayer with the average till they change the bill of fare. All we get a day is gruel. There's not a crust, not a crumb we can find. Can we beg, can we borrow, or cadge? But there's nothing to stop us from getting a thrill when we all close our eyes and imagine food, glorious food, hot sausage and mustard, while we're in the mood, cold jelly and custard, peas pudding and saveloys. What next is the question? Rich gentlemen have it, boys, indigestion. Food, glorious food, we're anxious to try it. 3 banquets a day, our favorite diet. Just Just picture a great big steak, fried, roasted, or stewed, and food, glorious food, wonderful food. Food, glorious food. Don't care what it looks like, burned, underdone, crude. Don't care what the cook's like. Just thinking of growing fat, our senses go reeling. One moment of knowing that, full of feeling. Food, glorious food. What wouldn't we give for that extra bit more? That's all that we live for. Why should we be fated to do nothing but brood? More food, glorious food, heavenly food, wonderful food, glorious food. Let's eat.